Hey, how's everyone doing today? It's Ash Coyote, the Ash Coyote. I don't know where I'm going with this. Guess what we're talking about today? Relationships! Everybody's favorite topic. When I met my fox, it was love at first sight. Anyways, I was going through the comment section on my videos and came across this question. I'd love to get your thoughts on emerging furries in relationships and marriages. I've been married for 2.5 years and it's been a couple months since I decided to get more involved in the fandom. My husband never really knew I was a furry since I wasn't as active, but now that I am, he thankfully doesn't have a problem with it, but is confused about the concept. And I thought to myself, I know just the right people to answer this. My friend Bitters and her husband Marquis. But before we jump over to them, I will discuss a few of my own thoughts on relationships.
Are everyday relationships getting you down? Craving a relationship of the fuzzier variety on those frigid winter evenings? We have something for you to try, fursonly.com.
It'll work for me.
We have feisty foxes, crazy coyotes, and dreamy leggies all at your fingertips. Or should we say paw tips? Call today to receive your extensive furry dating questionnaire in the mail, and our certified furry matchmaker will input your data into our super powerful, ultra accurate algorithm. Be sure to include a sample of your desired fur. Then in just 7 short months, we will mail your matches directly to you. But wait, there's more. Call today to receive your choice of a feisty fox or crazy coyote sample sent to you with your questionnaire. Don't wait, act now. Fursonly.com is not responsible for what you do with your feisty fox or crazy coyote. All sample furs must be handled with care. All warranties will be void if the seal is broken. Foxes are not returnable items.
Something that comes up in the fandom when it comes to relationships is whether or not you date within the fandom or outside of it. Especially nowadays, the fandom is more visible and by proxy more acceptable than it used to be, making relationships outside of the fandom simpler in a lot of ways. To help discuss this topic, I will be bringing in my husband Chip. Before we get started, if you aren't already, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, boop that bell, and leave a comment in our comment section below. Alright, so joining me here today is Chip Fox. Say hi, Chip.
Hey, I'm Chip.
We will be going through some of the diverse types of relationships and experiences within the fandom, and talking about the ultimate question, the answer to life, the universe, and everything. Should you date other furries? Furries have so many types of relationships, almost as many types as there are personas, and for each person, they are uniquely suited to their own interests. The obvious and most common relationship type outside of the fandom would be the monogamous, aka closed relationship. But in furry, we see relationships outside of the norm more frequently. Chip, can you talk about some of the relationship types that you've encountered within the fandom?
Aside from monogamous relationships, I've seen polyamorous, platonic, and even open relationships.
Let's go through a few of those. So, polyamorous, can you, for the audience, assuming that they don't know what poly is, can you kind of give a loose definition of poly and talk about what that might entail?
A polyamorous relationship, or poly, might involve 2 or more partners. Generally, you expect at least 3 people involved, since it's more than a monogamous one, which is assumed to be 2 people. Generally, a polyamorous relationship could involve physical intimacy with multiple people, but it doesn't have to. It could just be romantic relationships with 3 people or more. It could be physical intimacy with some of them, not all of them. It could be emotional connections with multiple people, but they're all together in different ways.
So the big takeaway from this is it's more than 2 partners, and that can have varying degrees of intimacy, basically. So let's talk a little bit about open relationship. For those of you that don't know, an open relationship is a form of relationship in which the 2 people engaged in the relationship have agreed to be able to seek intimacy outside of that relationship. So Chip, can you talk a little bit about open relationships, maybe how they exist in the fandom?
So I'm not an expert, but from what I've learned in the fandom and elsewhere about open relationships is that usually it's 2 people in a full physical, intimate, romantic, emotional relationship that agree that they can see other people off and on, but not on a permanent basis. So the other people aren't part of that relationship, but they can provide maybe physical experiences or emotional experiences as long as the two partners agree on what's involved. There might be limits on what you can do in an open relationship, but the most important part is that both partners agree on what you can do with someone else.
And beyond that too, I think it's important to reiterate right now that in any form of relationship, open, poly, or monogamous, communication is key. And if you're engaging in any type of relationship beyond, I would say, monogamous, communication becomes way more important.
Communication gets complicated when you're talking to more than one person. It can get very tricky, so you want to be very clear with your partners or partner on what you want to do. It's super important to be completely open and honest about what you want out of the relationship. And if you aren't ready to be open and honest about what you want in a relationship, maybe you aren't ready yet. Maybe you need to work on that. Maybe you need to be dating and just having learning experiences. Learn what you like, learn what you don't like. Just go on dates, don't do anything permanent or incredibly serious until you're ready. Because honesty and communication are the most important things to keep a relationship going.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. So, Chip, can you talk a little bit about ACE? And for those of you that don't know, ACE is asexuality.
Yeah, so ace people can also be in relationships. They might not enjoy the physical intimacy of it, but they can still enjoy all the emotional and romantic benefits that a relationship might entail. It's just that they're not incredibly interested in the physical part. I've talked to people who are ace, and they've described it as if it's like coffee. They might like the smell of the coffee. They might like the experience of being in a coffee shop. They might enjoy the environment. They might not. But when it comes to tasting coffee, they just don't like it that much. And so that can apply to physical relationships too. They might enjoy the idea of it, but maybe not the full physical experience of physical intimacy.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So let's move on to the next question here. Now that furry is a little more commonplace, we see more folks with partners that aren't a part of the fandom directly. Maybe your partner is furry adjacent or not involved at all. It's way easier than it used to be. Trust me. So Chip, let's talk a little bit about the ups and downs of dating other furs.
Dating other furries within the fandom.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so dating furries can be interesting because part of the fandom is all about escapism. And so when people want to date within the fandom and suddenly that escapism sort of disappears because that relationship becomes real. A lot of people say that they love the relationship online that they have in this fantasy world, but then when it comes to real life, suddenly real life isn't quite the same as that escapist experience. And so dating other furries might be a little harder in some ways because it's not quite the fantasy that you want it to be. Real life tends to butt its way in and get in the way of the ideal relationship that you want.
Oh, absolutely. It's significantly more complicated when you're dealing with a real physical person in your presence 24/7, as opposed to, like being able to pick up and chat with somebody online for like an hour every evening.
Right. One of the most common experiences I have seen in the fandom is that they are very, very close online. And then when it comes to making that relationship a reality, it's much, much harder for them. Because sometimes online relationships don't prepare you for real life.
On the flip side of that, though, in some ways they can help prepare you for real life.
Yeah, so relationships online can prepare you for some things. Like you can figure out what types of relationships you enjoy, what types of physical experiences you want to try out. You can live through your character and experiment a little more than most people do outside the fandom. And that experimentation might prepare you for some of the consequences that you'll face later in real life.
I do think it's interesting that, especially with our community, being so active online, it does kind of offer a safe space in the sense that, you're not having to put your real physical self out there so much as an idealized version of it. Now, that idealized version of it can kind of come back to bite you because everybody will see this character, this avatar, this idea of you first. And then they meet the real you. And you have to reconcile the differences. And that's always fascinating.
Right. Sometimes that goes really well and sometimes it doesn't. It can be a challenge, but at least dating within the fandom, you have the baseline experience of furry art and fursuiting and conventions and things you both could relate to.
Absolutely. So let's actually kind of move a little bit to some of the misconceptions. So let's talk about this conversation from the perspective of the non-furry dating a furry. So what do you think some of the misconceptions a non-furry might have about the fandom when entering into a relationship with a furry?
I think they might assume that your whole life has to revolve around the fandom. They might not enjoy going to furry conventions, they might not enjoy furry art, and they think that's a deal breaker. But it doesn't have to be. Someone can be into furry art and fursuiting and conventions, and the other partner doesn't have to be, because there's more to life than just the fandom. Relationships go way beyond the fandom, because in life you have to. There's jobs, there's family, there's traveling, you have to move. There's a lot more to life than just the furry fandom, and you both can work on that together. You don't always have to have the fandom in common.
So when I first met you, Chip, I was not transitioned at all. In fact, I was still very much in the closet about my trans identity. We were just two madly in love, super goofy, gushy, lovey-dovey gay lovebirds. I mean canines. And let me just say that it was fabulous. Now, sometime around our 5th year together, I finally began to feel more comfortable with myself and talk about my identity as a trans woman with Chip. So, Chip, do you remember when I first came out, and can you tell me about that experience from your perspective?
Okay, when you came out, it wasn't easy for me because that was a big deal. Like, transitioning isn't something small. Having a trans partner means that they might have to go through years of required therapy. It means that in order to get a surgery, they have to see a psychologist and address any mental issues they might have first, like anxiety. A lot of trans people experience anxiety.
I do in spades.
So yeah, that kind of affected our relationship in some negative ways and some positive ways. Transitioning is extremely stressful in every single way. It brings up a lot of issues maybe that we weren't prepared to deal with. Plenty of things that we weren't ready for, but we had to learn to work through it. And working through the hard times really taught us how to communicate with each other, trust each other, and learn more about what we liked in our partners.
When I started, I was incredibly immature. I mean, I will make that blatantly clear right now.
Yeah.
It was
you were in your 20s.
I think I just turned 27, and at that point in my life, I hadn't taken the time to question that identity. And I think that brings up a natural conflict. I mean, of course, in any relationship, this is going to bring up conflict, but for me personally, it kind of enhanced that conflict to a point where I became incredibly self-destructive.
Yeah, you were questioning who you were, who you wanted to be, what your role in the relationship was, and what my role in the relationship was. We even questioned if we should be together because it was such a big change in personality, in maturity.
Oh my God.
And in experiences.
It was hard. I still sit back in awe of the fact that we were able to make it through all that, to be honest, because I know a lot of my friends have not been so lucky.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't work out. Someone might mature and someone might not. And that's the hard part too, is that when you go through major life changes, you have to grow up in a lot of ways.
Well, so I believe that ends our little interview segment. Whenever it comes to relationships, it's important to be transparent when it comes to discussing your interests and identity. Furry, of course, carries with it the stigma of being weird, amongst many other things. Gee, I wonder why they think we're weird. It's just like anything else that plays a big role in your life. Now, explaining what a furry is can be a bit harder because it's different for every individual in our community. I would say the simplest definition is that we are fans of anthropomorphic characters with interests ranging from a simple hobby level to interests all the way up to defining identity in someone's life. Shameless plug time, you can show them parts of my Fandom web series if they want something a bit more comprehensive and explorative of our community. The link is in the description below. Whatever your interest level is, just let them know and explore it together. Now on to Bitters and her husband Marquis. So these two sweethearts have been together for a long while. At some point in their marriage, it came out that Bitters is a furry, and this is their story.
My name's Bitters. I'm a furry artist as well as a fine art trained artist. Most of the stuff I do is, commission based. I have dabbled in some other things like fursuit head making, but I'm not as good as it is. I'm just drawing. So I do a lot of commissions, a lot of badges. People seem to like my watercolor work a lot. I do that. So I mix a lot of my fine art training into my furry art training experience. My husband I don't know if he knew when we were married, but he didn't know when we were dating. The funny thing is I never hid it. And he often saw my furry artwork, but for some reason he just never put two and two together, which is really funny to me because I never made any motion to hide it from him, except for maybe like the first few months we were together in college. But other than that, I think he probably found out like the first year we were married maybe. And I think somebody told him I was a furry because he just didn't really accepted what I did as perfectly normal, which I find hilarious and also hard to believe.
My name is Marquis, and we've been married for about 4 years. And I would say that the first time I realized that she was a furry was probably 2016. So about 3 years. I honestly didn't know what a furry was before I found out that she was one. I told one of my friends what my wife was kind of into, and he just kind of said, he's like, "Oh my God, your wife's a furry." The first thing I did was go to YouTube and type in furry, and I watched like a documentary about furries. It was kind of playful. It was like a Disneyland for people who like to wear suits and stuff. And then, it kind of got into the dark side, and I was like, whoa. So then I started digging deeper, like what is really going on in the furry universe or whatever.
When I was getting my degree in art, furries weren't very accepted because you're trying to get something fine art. In fine art, you're working in traditional methods, fine oil paints, stuff like that. And furry was kind of frowned upon. It was kind of seen as low art. There's a difference between fine art and low art. And furry is seen as low art, aka comic art. Anything that's done for the masses, that sort of thing is considered low art. But if I had to do sketches and I had to have a certain amount of work done, and I still had to pay my way through college, so I was doing furry art the whole time. So he had to have seen it because, he was around all the time. I drew him as a furry often. It wasn't uncommon for me to ask, "Hey, what's your favorite animal right this second?" Or "What do you think animal is interesting?" Or because I'd need to study anatomy, and furries was a great way to do that. Combining human anatomy with animal anatomy is something I've always been interested in. And then after college, I did it for money because I was right out of college, and, art degree doesn't get you very far sometimes. So that's what I did for money, was furry commissions. After he came back from his first deployment, I had gotten a fursuit. I think that's when it really hit him. I feel like that's kind of like a big wake-up call, maybe, I think, for most people. He thought it was really cool. He even put on the head and was like, cool with it. And let me backtrack here because he was actually the mascot for a college, which is a horse. So he was, the guy, he hit fursuit before I ever did. But anyway, I think that's when he was like, oh, she's a real furry, 100%.
I didn't know she had one for a long time, and after finding out that she was a furry, I joked around about it a lot, and you know, after watching the YouTube documentary and stuff, I just asked her, and she told me she had a fursuit, and she was actually making one, which I thought was actually kind of cool considering the process and how expensive they can be. Tried on the head one time because she asked me to, but that was like the closest I've ever had to putting on a fursuit.
It's funny because at this point, you know, I could tell he's a little bit wary, you know, but he's never gonna say like, oh, that's weird to me, really. He's always gonna be very supportive outwardly, but you can see there was a little bit of like, you know, like a little hesitation, but you know, he was always 100% behind what I was doing. He trusted me not to be too weird, I guess. First thing I would do is to make sure that you're not wanting to pressure them into becoming a furry, because that's an identity in itself, right? Break it down as simply as possible. So for example, a lot of people like anime. Say, hey, I like this. Compare it to anime, or compare it to something that they enjoy. And be like, this is my hobby, or this is my thing. And kind of just ease into the like, I really enjoy doing this. I have a lot of friends in this. We're overwhelmingly positive. Bring out the good things about it that you enjoy, because when you enjoy something, your partner should enjoy that you enjoy it. The second step is say there are some weird things about it, and that's okay. You know, just be honest about it. Like, I don't 100% enjoy everything about the fandom, or, you know, in general. So it's like, I don't, you know, I'm not crazy about this and this, but I really enjoy this and this. And kind of just have an open discussion about what they think furry is, and then give the reality of it. Read the comfortability of your partner. You should be able to gauge at some level what they're okay with and what not, even with body language, and ease them into it. You know, nobody wants to be dragged to a furry convention when not even really knowing what furries are, because like how aggressive that would be in a way to just be kind of like shell-shocked. I think just be gentle.
For anyone that has never heard of a furry, I would say it's almost like an alter ego type thing where, you know, you have your normal life, and then every once in a while you like to put on this persona of someone that you also like to be, but it's not like an everyday thing. It's like a secret identity.
Furry is escapism. And it's not a bad thing. It's entirely a normal human thing to want escapism. Video games are a form of escapism, and a lot of people have that as a hobby or a career now, so that's another thing. And that's what I would say furry is, and it's just another method of coping with day-to-day, or it can become a business. A lot of people are very successful in making a business out of this. It's definitely an art form. It's a lot of things. It's a very complex community we've got.
If your spouse is into being a furry, it's okay, and you don't have to be involved. You don't have to like fully support it, but you can also just be there and understand like that's something that they like to do. And at first, after watching the documentary, I thought it was kind of strange and I wasn't fully into it. But I knew that that's what the wife likes to do. So I was like, hey, if you want to do that, you know, here's some money, make your fursuit.
Remember, when it comes to relationships, communication is key. Always talk and be open and understanding to your partner's interests. Communities like the furry fandom can be a very enriching place to a relationship. Thank you all for watching. If you'd like to help support me and my channel, please consider donating to my Patreon. Just $1 a month is worth more than all the ads here on my channel. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Goodbye! Starting with my superfans, we have Diana DePry, Wolf Ryder, Billy Daxter, Elliot Excel, Cutter. Thank you all so much for contributing to the growth of this channel. It means the world to me. Next we have my fan tier, with Dan Fox, Nova Halvern, Solace the Wolf. Y'all are amazing, thank you! And finally we have my early access tier with Scaleth, Shadowfaxy, Tyler Furlong, Tara the Linus, Edith Everett, Captain Bluetooth, Cockernell, Katie Rose, That One Canadian, Nate Latham, Runes and Kaz, Husky Heroine, JD Locklead, and Mitsukatsa Wild Rose. Thank you all so much for contributing to the channel. In case any of you are interested in becoming a patron, I do offer 3 rewards tiers: Early Access, which gives you access to videos like these ahead of their release and your name featured in the credits; Fan, which gets you a signed fursuit photo of me, thank you note, and everything from the Early Access tier; and finally, Superfan, which allows you to have one of your questions featured on Ask Ash, as well as everything from the previous 2 tiers. Beyond all this, I will be revamping my Patreon in the coming months and adding some extra cool prizes and perks tiers, so keep your eyes peeled. Check out my Patreon at patreon.com/ashcoyote. The link is in the description below.